Hey everybody, welcome to episode 118 of Waking Up to Narcissism. I'm your host, Tony Overbay. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but not to be confused with therapy. This is a podcast where I just want to share as much information as I can. And speaking of that, today I will call it a special emergency bonus episode of Waking Up to Narcissism. Last week, I did one on an updated view of gaslighting, and we broke down a poem. And that is one of probably the most downloaded episodes that I've had up to this point in the initial 48 hours. And I so appreciate the feedback that I received from that. If you haven't listened to that, please go back and do. We didn't even get to the main points that I wanted to. So I said I would do a part 2, and I'm busily working on that. So if you did listen to the part 1 last week, and if that episode brought up any examples that you have in your life of where you felt like now that you're aware of what gaslighting looks like, whoever you are, if you are the pathologically kind person and you're recognizing or waking up to the gaslighting in your relationship, or if you're the person that's recognizing, oh my gosh, I do that, because I got some pretty fascinating emails in that realm too, please send them to me and I will put some of those in part 2. But I guess I'm being very dramatic. The reason why I want to call this an emergency bonus episode is because I feel for the person that wrote this letter, this email. Do we call them letters anymore? If it doesn't come by carrier pigeon or owl or mail person, it's an email. And the person wrote in the following. And then this is one of the things I always wanted to do with this podcast. And here we are 118 episodes later, but really break down the game film. If I have to go line by line to just point out the emotional immaturity that is happening in relationships. And you'll see why I think this is a pretty significant email. I'm going to read the email in its entirety, and then I will go through and break it down. Well, the person said, I need somebody to tell me I'm not crazy. I don't even know where to start in my story, but the past few years have been a roller coaster, and my husband has made everybody think I'm crazy. I am crazy now. Well, he makes me look like I am. I'm so lost, and I just needed somebody to tell me if I'm imagining things and if I'm overthinking. And he isn't this person. I'm so hoping that he isn't. In the last 3 years, and they said it's fine to share, but that's a pretty significant medical injury that is mind-blowing, but maybe just this person will know who they are, but I'll leave this part out just because it's such a specific detail, but it was definitely a medical emergency that occurred. But then they've also rolled the car. They had an abortion. They attempted suicide. They have a massive family situation, which they've been blamed for, which she says, let me get back to reading this. She said, a massive family situation, which I've been blamed for, which is killing me because I have lost everything. And it's just not true. He broke my trust. We had financial stress. I've always been there for us and done what's best for our family. And I spent the last few years trying to convince myself it's me, that the problem is me. And I made him go to counseling recently, and he's playing games. I can't explain it in messages. I just need to know if what I'm doing is wrong because I love him, and my kids and I can't leave because he plays games. But then he pretends I'm forcing him to be with me. I've made a timeline of our life, and I'm always looking at things from different perspectives because I know I'm not perfect, but he's made everybody, even our kids, think I'm the problem. And I told him he has narcissistic tendencies. Because after years, I saw a podcast and it made so much sense, but I think I made a mistake by telling him because he's now telling me I'm the narcissist, and it doesn't make sense. But with all the trauma that's been going on and still happening, I'm not handling it, and I really, really need help, please. And they say that they are begging. This is not to be confused with counseling. The first thing I would say is this person does need help, and I hear you. I get a lot of emails like this. And this is the part that truly does break my heart because this is somebody that is desperately reaching out to anyone, a podcast host that they felt maybe they connected with. But you can find low cost or even no cost counseling in your area. Or if you do feel like you're a victim of abuse, please reach out to, in this scenario, a women's shelter. You can find a domestic violence hotline, but please get help. Reaching out to a podcast host is one thing that you can do, and it is better than not doing anything at all, for sure. But I feel fortunate that I was able to have the time to record something about this because I get so many of these that I unfortunately don't. And my wonderful assistant, Naomi, will try to respond and provide the person with some resources. But let's just break this down, though, as close to line by line as I can. So the person just starts by saying, I need somebody to tell me I'm not crazy. I don't even know where to start my story. But the past few years have been a roller coaster, and my husband has made everybody think I'm crazy. So right out of the bat, you are not crazy. You are a wonderful, beautiful human being. You are a combination of all of your nature and nurture, your birth order, your DNA, your abandonment, your rejection, your hopes, your fears, your dreams. But unfortunately, you are spending a lot, if not all of your emotional calories and energy on trying to figure out what is wrong with you and how to express it to him and more as well. if we can start from a place of, I am not crazy, I'm a human being. If you are a religious person, you're a son or daughter of God. If you are a spiritual person, you are a creation of the universe, but you start from a place of, I am okay. I have everything I need within me, but this journey of life is my chance to be able to unlock all of my talents, my abilities, my blessings. And I'm going to have to interact with life in order to learn more about myself. But the unfortunate part is most of us weren't modeled what to do with that, what that even looks like growing up. So we find ourselves in these situations and our default is that something's wrong with me. And again, it goes back to, because if I can identify me as the problem, then I can do something about it. Because if I am not the problem, then that might mean my relationship, my job, the situation, my faith community, whatever it looks like, may not be what is best for me. So I want to fix it so I can figure out how to make it work, because this is your familiar. This is what you know. You are not crazy. And what does that mean? And this is why this fits, I think, right in between the 1 and 2-parter of the gaslighting episodes. This is gaslighting. It's classic gaslighting. This is when, and I'm just going to say narcissist, because a narcissistic trait and tendency individual, or someone who is struggling on the spectrum of extreme to even more extreme emotional immaturity, is a mouthful. So for the rest of this, lock in. We're going to say narcissist. So this is when a narcissist messes with your whole sense of reality so much that you start doubting your own sanity. And it is like they are rewriting your story so much that you just feel like the villain. And they are playing this innocent victim, and they are gathering their flying monkeys around them. They're triangulating, and they are continually keeping you off balance. Now, is it nefarious? Is it manipulative? Well, the jury's out sometimes. Sometimes it might seem more calculated and others not. But you're dealing with somebody that most likely has been interacting with this as their way of interacting with the world for as long as you remember, if you really stop and think about it. When people will say, no, it wasn't like this before, and I'm not saying that it could have been better before, but most likely what happens early on in a relationship, this is part of the love bombing, it's part of the codependency, the enmeshment phase, but we're showing the very best versions of ourselves. And we're just stuffing a lot of our real authentic selves down because we're afraid that if the person really sees us and really knows us, then they might run away. So even if we don't completely agree on something, we're saying that we do because I like this person, or I'm afraid to be without this person. So yeah, I do agree. And that part where I'm saying you're afraid to be without the person can be either the pathologically kind or the narcissist. Pathologically kind, this can feel familiar. This can feel like this is a person that I can work with, I can fix. This is a person that makes up if I'm the introvert, they're the extrovert. If I'm the one who's insecure, they seem very secure. We can tag team this life together. So that's part of the draw. But then you start going through life and you go through different experiences and different things happen. And because you're two actual different human beings, different individuals with life experiences, now all of a sudden we're gonna really feel like we maybe disagree on some things, but we don't have the tools to communicate effectively about the things that we disagree about. So that crazy making behavior is designed to keep you off balance and keep you under their control. You cannot have love or control in an adult relationship. You are desperately trying to have love, and this person only knows that control is the way that they keep somebody close to them. That creates this vibe or this feeling of needing to gaslight. She continues, I am crazy now. Well, he makes me look like I am. So that right there, this is the result of prolonged emotional abuse, because when you're constantly told you're crazy or unstable, you start to believe it. It's like your brain's being rewired to see yourself through the narcissist warped lens. And then all of a sudden you're using the concept of confirmation bias, and you're actually looking for ways to say, man, I did forget this, or this did happen, or I did say this. And those are things that we all do. We all make mistakes. We all forget things. We all slip up on things. But then when you're saying you're coming from a place of, see how crazy I am. And I think about one person in particular, but I've had so many clients that will say, well, then before you know it, then I forgot to even pick up my kid. And then they look at me like, have you ever heard anything so crazy? And sometimes it feels dismissive, where as a therapist who sees a lot of clients, I want to say, so that one I've actually probably heard twice today. Not trying to make the person, not trying to dismiss their experience, but then we just start to all of a sudden, if we think we're bad, if we think something's wrong with us, then we are working from this place of, see, the things that I do just justify that. But if I'm operating from a home base of, I'm actually okay, but I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, then I'm okay. And oh my gosh, check that out. I forgot to do this. As a matter of fact, I'm literally thinking right now, did I leave the oven on here? Because I'm here on a Saturday before I go back to the airport to go to Arizona, and I made waffles. I had waffles in the freezer. Who knew? But if I did, then that would not be, see, there you go. Everything was going great, but there I go, leaving the oven on again. See how bad I am? I don't think I did, but I will check, first of all. And if I did, check that out, because I was having a great time until I remembered that. And so I still am having a great time. And I hope that you can see it's how we treat ourselves. It's the voice that we talk to ourselves with. Is it the, you idiot, you're so bad, you're broken? Or is it the, okay, we're having a good time. We're here, we're recording. We got to get to the airport soon. We're just doing and being. And then, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about I should probably check on the oven again. That is a whole different vibe. And that is part of that interior landscape, your implicit memory, what it feels like to be you. And it is based on the slow residue of your lived experience. So every time that you tell yourself, I'm a piece of garbage or a piece of crap or what's wrong with me, or that is just not energy that we need to be feeding ourselves. We need to be I'm just doing, I'm being, I'm having experiences. And then, oh man, this one didn't go the way I'd hoped. So now I can break down the game film. Your brain's being rewired to see yourself through the narcissist warp lens. Don't let them give you that. They don't need that much power in your head. They don't deserve that much power in your head. They don't deserve that neural real estate, that much of your emotional calories and energy. Life is amazing and wonderful, but it can also feel it's pretty short in the grand scheme of things, as this 54-year-old man now. So you need to take all of that neural real estate and then use that to your advantage. Learn, be, do, connect with others, not feel like what's wrong with me. But here's the kicker though. And I don't think I've ever put this way in previous podcasts, but feeling crazy in response to crazy making behavior, if you really break it down that way, it's actually a pretty sane response. If you didn't feel crazy, then that would be kind of odd, because this person is doing crazy things, saying crazy things. Look at that. I feel crazy. Seems like that's a pretty solid response. So then she goes on to say, I'm so lost and I just need somebody to tell me if I'm imagining things. And if I'm overthinking and he isn't this person, I'm so hoping that he isn't. So let's talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance, because that's what this is. And it is in full swing. It's one of those psychology buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot, but it's really important to understand it's a mental tug of war, and it's between what you're experiencing and then what you want to believe. So your gut is telling you one thing, but then your heart is truly hoping for another. And that's why it's confusing. It takes up a lot of emotional calories. It can feel exhausting. But it's such a common experience for people that are dealing with narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse. Living with cognitive dissonance in a relationship is like being in this constant state of emotional tension, where your mind is always trying to reconcile conflicting thoughts and then also conflicting experiences. And so that continuing internal struggle can be exhausting, and it can significantly impact your mental health. It can take a toll on your self-esteem, how you show up as a human, trying to find yourself, how you act as a parent, how you show up at work. But there's hope, because now that we're recognizing cognitive dissonance, that's one of those concepts where it is such a crucial first step toward healing and clarity. When you go from, I didn't know what I didn't know, to now here is this thing that I'm aware of. Unfortunately, that's going to feel pretty heavy. And a lot of times it will feel like I wish I didn't know, but you're just on that process of becoming. You're on that path. So now that you know something that you didn't know, you're still going to feel like I'm not doing whatever I need to do well. And that's one of the most difficult places to be. But we're going to move on to that next step by starting to get help and starting to advocate for yourself, that you're going to start to move into that. Okay, now I know, and I'm starting to do more than I ever have. And eventually you'll become. And that can take some time, though, I think is one of the most frustrating things. But when you start to identify the conflicting thoughts and feelings, now you're starting to see the relationship dynamic more clearly, because that's how you start to slowly lift this brain fog that's been clouding your judgment. And as you become more aware of cognitive dissonance, you might start noticing patterns in your relationship that you hadn't seen before. And this is where it's the beginning of starting to trust your own perceptions, your own feelings, starting to trust your gut more rather than constantly second guessing yourself. Because I think a real important thing to acknowledge is that it's okay to see that a relationship isn't exactly what you hoped it would be. It's normal to have mixed feelings, especially when you're dealing with somebody who is emotionally immature or narcissistic. But it goes back to that origin story of not feeling like our feelings were okay, like we weren't allowed to have our own feelings growing up. And so now here they are. Even our own brain is trying to reconcile, I feel this, but this is what I see. I might even feel like this is the person that is my forever person, but what I'm seeing is this person is not being very kind. And recognizing these different feelings, that's actually a sign of emotional intelligence, not a sign of weakness. But if you find that you're continually trying to make sense of contradictory behaviors or feelings in your relationship, then it might be time to take a step back. This is where you will need to evaluate the situation. Consider reaching out to a therapist, a counselor, a friend who you really can trust to help you navigate these complex emotions, these relationship dynamics. And I believe, as a therapist that works in this area, that finding a good therapist that understands emotional immaturity, personality disorders can be incredibly validating. But I also know that people have had those situations where they go to a therapist and the therapist says, well, hey, everybody makes mistakes. And, there's two sides to every coin, and good old cliches like that. Because the bottom line is, I don't know how many minutes in, but I already went to a bottom line. You deserve a relationship that brings you peace and emotional stability, not constant confusion and self-doubt. We want to get to this place where you can trust your instincts, where you're starting off being kind to yourself. And please know that this clarity is going to come gradually. And there's going to be a lot of setbacks where you're going to go back to this place of, it's me, what am I doing wrong? Because it's actually okay to prioritize your own emotional well-being and seek relationships that are consistently supportive and loving. Now, will they be perfect? No. But when you are with a partner that is willing to self-confront and grow together, to find themselves, to be able to sort out their own things and not expect you to manage their emotions. And I heard more of the clients that I'm personally working with identify with some concepts I shared a few weeks ago about the whole object relations and object constancy, far more than I had anticipated. I think that those are game-changing concepts, but I'll be the first to admit that I haven't necessarily had the experience where those around me see the depth of these concepts and come in saying, oh my gosh, the whole object relations and object constancy things are so profound. Now that I don't know if it's just starting to saturate my content with these two concepts over and over, but I think it's really important. I think it's really starting to resonate. This is what I'm going to go back to often. So I'd love to bring gentle awareness to these two concepts right now, meaning if I was more direct, I'd say, hey, time to pay attention. I'm about to teach. And I want you to know that if I was writing this to you right now, that would have been followed with approximately 2 to 3 ha's, as in ha-ha or ha-ha-ha, just FYI. So when we talk about whole object relations and object constancy, we're diving into some pretty deep psychological waters. But here's the thing, we're already actually swimming in these waters, whether we realize it or not. Because the truth is, we all start out emotionally immature. We're not born with a fully developed sense of self. We don't understand what whole object relations or object constancy means. It's still hard to wrap our heads around. But these are skills that develop over time, and they're through experiences, through relationships, and absolutely through things like therapy or diving into, one person was weaponizing this in my office a couple of weeks ago, heady psychological material. They said that's all that their spouse is reading, as if that is a bad thing. Can you believe it? Now they're asking me questions. They're expecting a lot of things from me. But let's break this down, and I'm going to turn back to some insights from Eleanor Greenberg, a clinical psychologist who's done some great work in this area. So whole object relations is about seeing people, including ourselves, I think that's really important to note, as complete individuals, meaning that we have good and challenging qualities. Again, I struggle sometimes saying bad. There's no bad parts. Good and challenging qualities. It's like being able to look at a person and say, okay, they can be really funny and caring sometimes, but they can also be pretty hurtful and selfish. Because it's seeing the whole picture, not just the parts that we like or the parts that we don't, because we're all this combination of a bunch of these parts. Then object constancy is about maintaining a positive emotional connection to somebody, even when we're angry or hurt or frustrated or disappointed by their behavior. And it's knowing that your partner is still your partner, even when they're having a bad day or you're in the middle of an argument. Now, this might sound completely contradictory when I'm talking about complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because that's the quote normal way that this looks. When two people recognize their emotional immaturity and they want to strive to be better as individuals so they can show up better. They choose themselves. Now we can choose into the relationship. Because here's where it gets pretty interesting. Greenberg points out that people with narcissistic personality disorder often lack both whole object relations and object constancy. So what that means is they tend to see people, including themselves, in all or nothing, black and white terms, either as special, perfect, and entitled, or as worthless and defective pieces of garbage. There isn't a middle ground. And you'll start to see that concept play out a lot. No middle ground, no gray area. Gray is uncomfortable. But remember, uncomfortable and discomfort is where the growth is. If we just go all or nothing, black or white, it's our brain trying to use less electrical activity based off of that in the world of acceptance and commitment therapy, this false premise that we have a finite amount of electrical activity in our brain. So we got to habitualize everything. Everything's got to be yes, no, good, bad, black, white. And it doesn't. That's the part where our brain, it can be the most incredible thing in the world. And it's also just this adorable, not really pink, not even pink, kind of gray, squishy blob that is doing its best to survive. And so the survival to it just means, hey, I don't want to try anything new because that might go out and get me killed. This is why somebody with narcissistic traits might put you on a pedestal one day and then completely devalue you the next. I did a podcast not too long ago on emotional whiplash, and it is not okay. It is not normal. It is not conducive to a connected relationship when somebody can tell you that you are the scum of the earth one day and then, oh my gosh, you're the most perfect individual ever. Because that person struggles to hold on to their good opinion of you once they notice a flaw. And this is that part where when people are hurting, they hurt people. When the narcissist or the emotionally immature feels incredibly insecure or threatened because they see all of a sudden you are starting to think that you are actually okay, then they need to say, oh, that makes me uncomfortable because if you're okay, you're going to leave. So I need to knock you down a peg. But then when you're down and now I want something, I'll build you back up again. So here's one of the most important parts is that to some degree, we do all struggle with this object constancy or holding on to the ability to notice that people can frustrate us. We can really find things that we appreciate in them. Now, not to the extreme of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, but I think it's safe to say that we all have moments where we forget the good when we're faced with the bad or vice versa. So this is where the understanding of cognitive dissonance comes back in. Now, here we go. We're back. It's a game changer. Once you recognize that you're experiencing cognitive dissonance, that mental discomfort from holding two conflicting beliefs, now you can start to untangle these thoughts and see the situations more clearly. So instead of trying to reconcile every instance of bad behavior with the good times, so when you are noticing that something that is off and you don't appreciate the way that something is going, instead of just saying, but here's all the good things that they do, because now you're negating your own feelings about these negative experiences. But knowing this now, this concept of whole object relations, this object constancy, add a little cognitive dissonance. Now we got all the psychology words here hanging out for a good time. You can start to acknowledge both sides without feeling the need to excuse the bad. You might think, yeah, we had a great time last week and they said some really hurtful things, because both of those experiences are real. And this awareness allows you to hold space for the complexity of relationships without diminishing your own experiences or feelings. That's the big takeaway here, is that you can still say, I did like that time that we spent, but I'm not okay with the way that you spoke to me. So I am acknowledging the good, because when you tell the person often, hey, I don't like the way you spoke to me, they're saying, okay, but we also have fun, right? Absolutely we do. Back to the part where it's not okay for the way that you talk to me. You can appreciate the good moments for what they are, but you can also recognize harmful patterns or behaviors for what they are. Think of it like developing a new kind of vision. You're starting to see the full picture in all of its complexity. Maybe you were only seeing dull colors and you put some glasses on and all of a sudden you see all the colors. So they're really bright, but then the dark ones maybe are even darker. But you're also not ignoring the good times or the potential that you once saw in the relationship. And you're not using those good times to excuse or overlook abusive or manipulative behavior. And this more balanced perspective, it's empowering. It allows you to make clearer, more informed decisions about your relationships and your boundaries. You might find yourself thinking, okay, I know we have fun together sometimes, but these hurtful patterns are consistent and I can't do them. I personally am noticing now that I can't show up for the good times when I'm still hanging on to what did they just call me? And if they pull out such greatest hits as, well, you need to let go of the past. You need to just be in the present and the future. How about I be the one that's in charge of that? Let me decide that. Now, do I need to work on acceptance? I do for me, but that acceptance doesn't mean that now I'm jumping right back into an abusive relationship. That acceptance can mean I am accepting that those feelings are real and that did happen to me, because now I can start to make a more informed decision. I think it's important to remember acknowledging the good doesn't negate the bad. Recognizing the bad doesn't erase the good. Both can coexist. It's wild when you think about it that way. And understanding this helps you navigate these relationships with more clarity, but we're looking to get to self-compassion. So takeaway, by working on developing this whole object relations, this concept of object constancy, and by understanding cognitive dissonance, you're better equipped to see your relationships and the people in them more holistically, more organically. And with that understanding, now you have another tool for breaking free from cycles of abuse or manipulation, and in actually looking and trying to foster healthier, more balanced relationships for the future. And I will never stop saying that this is a journey that we're on. And when we want answers right now, that is because we want to feel better right now, to alleviate our own personal discomfort. Learning to sit with that discomfort with the right tools, now we can take in this entire scene for what it is. Look at that whole object relations concept. And then we can acknowledge, man, I do have some cognitive dissonance going on right now. My brain's trying to hang on to two different things. It's trying to hang on to this version of the relationship that I've always thought I had and what just happened. And let me just sit with both of those, because that's a sign of emotional intelligence, a sign of emotional maturity. So the key is to keep striving for that balance, the ability to see the whole person, starting with yourself, with all of our own complexities, our flaws, but also our strengths. Okay, brace yourself for this next part. In the last 3 years, they had an insane medical issue. They also rolled a car. They had an abortion. They attempted suicide. There was a massive family situation where now they have been blamed for, which she says, this is killing me because I've lost everything. And I know that it's not true. But in that process, he broke my trust. So that's a lot of trauma. And also what we're seeing here is the concept of scapegoating. The narcissist is pinning all the blame on this listener for this massive family situation. They're making her the family punching bag, deflecting the responsibility away from themselves. And I don't know the details around that, but I've experienced so many of these situations where if you look at even the narcissist, they cannot be at fault for anything. So they will spin and spin whatever the story is until it alleviates them of blame. And then it pins it on the pathologically kind person who will then typically try to now defend themselves of something that isn't even true, which only makes them feel more crazy. And this level of blame can be crushing, especially when you're already dealing with so much personal trauma. She then said we had financial stress. She said, I've always been there for us. I've done what's best for the family. And I've spent the last few years trying to convince myself that it's me that's the problem. And I look at this as a form of internalized gaslighting. She is gaslighting herself. You've been so consistently told that you're the problem that you've started to believe it. If you become your own worst inner critic, you're echoing the narcissist accusations. And this is a hard mindset to break out of, but we go back to that recognizing it is the first step. Because if you hear enough that it is your fault, that it is your problem, and if you're already programmed to then absorb and alleviate others' discomfort, and then do what is best for the common good. I remember hearing about this concept a while ago, and there's a big hubbub row. Man, am I like 100? Some challenges in the online world of a therapist talking about trauma dumping. And they were saying that a client was coming in and they were trauma dumping on them and acting as if that was something that was surprising. Well, they're a therapist. That's part of their job is I will hear your trauma. I will help you heal through that trauma. Because often the person that's coming in to do that trauma dumping is somebody that is everyone else's trauma dumpster. And they aren't the ones that feel heard and seen and understood. And when all of a sudden they need something for them, now all of a sudden everybody else is nowhere to be found. And so that is really, really difficult to be in that position where you take it for everyone. But then the second you start to speak up for yourself, everybody else around you doesn't go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We haven't been here for you. They say, geez, I got things I have to do. Because then eventually the person that is the pathologically kind that takes it all is like, oh, okay, I'll just keep working. I'll keep doing it. I'll figure it out. So next she said, I made him go to counseling recently and he's playing games. She said, I can't explain it in messages. I can only imagine, but I think I know where you're going with this. There's a episode that I did for therapists that I just resurfaced and I put it in my private women's Facebook group because there's a lot of new people in there now. And it's not like I'm expecting them to go listen to all the back catalog, but they're going into therapy and their narcissistic spouse or person that they're in the relationship with now performs quite well for the therapist. And if you are a therapist who is not aware of what this looks like, the patterns that are prevalent in the relationship that come into therapy, then a lot of times the therapist will say, oh, okay, so he seems pretty cool. She seems like she's losing her mind. So I get it. I can understand why it seems like he's the more rational one. But I see the manipulation in therapy often. Narcissists or emotionally mature people are masters at turning therapy sessions to their advantage. It just becomes another workout at good old confabulation gym where they can take this situation and now they know what to do with it. It wasn't my fault. It was their fault. Or therapist, you don't really understand. Let me tell you, you can put your tools away for a little bit here because when I share with you the way I'm going to share it with you, then you'll understand what I'm talking about and you will now all of a sudden see my side. So they might charm the therapist. They'll most often, if not always, twist the narrative or use what they learn in therapy as ammunition later. And it's frustrating because what should be a safe space for healing becomes just another battlefield. I give this example, this concept of becoming differentiated, that at the end of the day, everything is a me issue, which is an empowering thing. How do I want to show up in this situation? Why am I reacting the way I am? Why do I need this person to calm down? Why do I so desperately want validation? Why do I want this person to just hear me and understand so much? Because I can look at that. That is a me issue. Now, what does that imply? That then that's a you issue, the things that you're going through. But that's not the point of differentiation. It's about me. It's things are a me thing. So how is that weaponized? When you immediately hear somebody learn these tools of differentiation, and now instead of doing some self-reflection, you often hear, well, that's a you thing. And that's something that you need to deal with. If the spouse says, man, I don't like the way that you said that, instead of the person saying, okay, I'm going to take a look at that and say, am I saying this passive aggressively? Or is this an emotionally immature way for me to show up in order to try to get my point across? Oh no, they're not going to hear that. The spouse that is saying, I'm really struggling with how you're talking to me right now. Well, then that spouse that's saying the mean things is going to say, well, that's a you thing. You need to work on that. So that's where the way that things get weaponized. And so going therapy is often a place where the emotionally immature or narcissistic person is getting new tools for the toolkit. She goes on to say, I just need to know if what I'm doing is wrong because I love him. And she says ringing my kids and I can't leave because he plays games, then pretends I'm forcing him to be with me. And here is where that situation screams trauma bonding. It's that intense emotional attachment that forms in abusive relationships. You love him despite the hurt, and leaving feels impossible. And that bit about pretending that you're forcing him to stay, that is classic somebody playing the victim. He's flipping the script, making himself look like the trapped one, when in reality, he's the one that is keeping you ensnared. And please go back and find an episode that I've done on trauma bonding or intermittent reinforcement, because it is like an addiction. It is the concept where the person that delivers you the punishment is also the one that is capable of giving you the reward. It's the same concept that we have with our phones, a trauma bond. You get a notification. Is it something that is good or is it something that's bad? Or it's really sad when you look at this as the way often that we or people have trained animals, where you are the one that delivers the punishment, but also literally the treat, the reward. And so then it keeps that person, that animal, that they are just almost cowering, just waiting for your approval. And then when they get it, they are ecstatic because that is all that they want. And then they get to the point where that's all they're thinking about all day is how can I get that approval? And man, I feel so bad if I do something wrong. And I'll just take a brief side note to go back to what's wrong with me? Nothing. You're a human going through life for the first time as you. And even this concept of right and wrong can often be viewed in hindsight, because if you do something and somebody says, I love the way you did that, then, oh my gosh, I did it right. But if you do something and then somebody says, I can't believe you did that. Oh no, did I do it wrong? And you can sense that a lot of times with kids in particular, where if you'll say, hey bud, what were you doing? If you see them in the kitchen and they're like, nothing. And then if you're saying, oh, because I love how industrious you are, it looks like you're about to make a recipe. That's impressive. Then they're like, yeah, I was about to make a recipe. I was about to make something, because turns out what they were doing was right. But if I was immediately going to say, hey, can you ask me next time before you start getting everything out? Then they're like, sorry, I know I did wrong. So we're often putting that, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? In the hands of someone else. When in reality, if I'm doing this, that's what I'm doing. So if somebody says, I don't like what you're doing, then I want to have that solid, flexible sense of self. Well, tell me take me on your train of thought. What are you thinking? Because I was just going to make cookies. But if you needed the kitchen, if we're running low on semi-sweet chocolate chips, which are so much better than milk chocolate, I'm going to be honest, then I can appreciate why you might be frustrated, but I wasn't aware. Oh, well, no problem then. We're good. She went on to say that she's made a timeline of our life, and she said, I'm always looking at things from different perspectives because I know that I'm not perfect. And to that, I will say kudos for that level of self-reflection, but I worry that at times, this is where we're just trying to make sense of things, goes back to the things that don't make sense. I think making the timeline is a healthy coping mechanism, because you're trying to see what your part of this was. And I'm not saying this because it will sound like a contradiction earlier, because if I can make sense of it, then I can fix it. And if I can fix it, then it can change. But if I can make sense of how I'm showing up or what my role is in something, then I can self-reflect. But the answer might be that I'm actually doing everything to the best of my ability. And I love when somebody will say, I'm not saying I'm perfect, because no one is perfect. We're all trying our best. And I often feel like that's the phrase that comes right after somebody is saying that they're about to say, excuse me, but I think this other person they might be doing something that really makes me uncomfortable, but I know I'm not perfect. And it's a way to deflect. But she's trying to make sense of a pretty senseless situation. And it's not even a dramatic fine line. I would just say there's a line where overanalyzing keeps you stuck in this cycle of abuse. But keeping a time frame for your own sanity, because of what we talked about earlier, the complex post-traumatic stress disorder, can be a very helpful thing. And I used to hear people say in sessions, or I remember I would think this even myself, where I can't take notes. That means I'm keeping score and I'm trying to prove that this person's wrong or I'm right. But at some point, the mature version of that is I'm going to jot down things in a journal because I'm starting to question my own sanity. And that is a me issue. And this is one way that I can do something about it. She said, he's made everyone, even our kids, think I'm the problem. And this is triangulation at its worst. The narcissist will turn your own children against you. They'll create allies in their campaign to isolate or discredit you. Some call it sequestering. They need you to feel like you are alone, because now we go back to that concept of trauma bonding, because now you need them in order for you to know if you are okay. And it's a heartbreaking tactic, and it can have long-lasting effects on family dynamics. And the concept of triangulation is where the person they can't stand on their own 2 feet and say, hey, this is a challenge, the way that you're doing this for me. And I'm talking about the more narcissistic person. They now need to bring in all the flying monkeys. They need to triangulate and say, your sister said the same thing. Your friends have been saying this. I even talked to my doctor about this. And then we start to feel like, oh my gosh, all these people. But one of the best things you can do is say, man, well, but I understand that this is a situation where you might not be in this mindset at this point. But at some point it's, well, hey, I'm calling my sister right now because I'd love some clarification. Because what you'll often see almost all the time is we're saying, no, don't. Look, the last thing I want you to do is get her involved because she said this to me in confidence. And so if it was truly the person saying, I'm worried about you and we're almost at intervention level, then if they said, I don't know how else to get it through to you. So I did talk to your sister. Then it's, let's all sit down and have a conversation together, because that's not what this is. I guarantee you. She said, I told him he has narcissistic tendencies. Here's where we insert the record scratch. If you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, it's such a normal thing. But number one rule of Narcissist Club, you don't tell the narcissist or call the narcissist a narcissist. But she said, because after years, I saw a podcast and it made so much sense. But I think I made a mistake by telling him, because he's now telling me I'm the narcissist. Where if you go back in the back catalog of Waking Up to Narcissism, you'll probably see a lot of the episodes around, nope, you're not. If you're asking yourself if you are, then you are not. If you are becoming aware of the situation and you believe your spouse or someone else around you is narcissistic or incredibly emotionally immature, it only makes sense that as the pathologically kind person that you want to express this to them, because you hope that they too will see that they are falling into these same patterns that you read in the books and hear in the podcast, so that they will then say, oh my gosh, I did not realize how narcissistic I am. Unfortunately, it becomes an emotionally immature response from the narcissist that's, no, I'm not, you are. And they just throw it right back at you. And now you're going to go defend yourself about, well, am I? And that is a classic case. I did an episode on this, and I highly recommend this one as well, on DARVO, which is deny, attack, reverse the victim and the offender. And it is a big time manipulative tactic where the abuser flips the accusation back on you by calling you the narcissist. They're deflecting attention from their own behavior and now putting you on the defensive. Again, now you have to defend yourself of something that you literally just came to the conclusion of that you think that they are doing. Back to the letter. She says, with all the trauma that's been going on and still happening, I'm not handling it and I really, really need help, please. And bless her heart, she says, I'm begging. That is a cry for help. And that is heartbreaking. And it's a clear sign of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Living this constant state of stress and confusion and emotional turmoil, and that can have serious effects on your mental health. You are not crazy. Your feelings are valid. What you're experiencing is real, and it's not okay. And recognizing these patterns is the first step toward breaking free from them. So please reach out to a therapist who specializes in narcissistic abuse, emotional immaturity, or contact a domestic violence hotline, because you deserve peace and respect and genuine love. Remember, the fact that you're questioning all this shows that you are actually saner than you think. So I hope anybody listening to this, if you identify with this, feel free to send in your story. Feel free to reach out and make a connection with somebody. Reach out to me if you're a guy in a situation with an emotionally immature or abusive woman, or a woman in a relationship with an emotionally immature, narcissistic, or abusive guy. And let's get you in, let's get your resources. Let's get you in one of the private groups. You deserve to be heard and understood. And remember that where you're at, if you have found yourself listening to this podcast and you're at whatever minute this is, then that is one of these, what I like to call leading indicators that Your body is crying for help. It is keeping the score. It's saying, I want more from my life, from my relationship. If you're the emotionally immature person that at first hated my guts, as you would hear the podcast, and now you are starting to resonate and identify, man, welcome to one of the craziest and it can be scariest rides of your life that is just so worth it. It's worth every bit of it because you're here because you saw a certain type of relationship modeled and you didn't know what you didn't know. And now the fact that you've been in a relationship with somebody that cares enough to then point this out, or the fact that you are the person that's starting to then wake up to your own emotional immaturity or the emotional immaturity in your relationship, it speaks volumes. You're right where you need to be. You got here exactly when you did, and you are here. And so now is the time to start raising that emotional baseline. Self-care is not selfish. You can go get a manicure and a pedicure. I have had one time. They're not so bad. My feet are a little bit ticklish, but you don't even have to run a marathon or learn a new language or I don't know, rescue foster kittens, or I guess if they're foster kittens, are they already in the foster kitten system? I don't know. But it's time to start looking at what you need to do to get yourself in a better place. Thank you so much for listening. If this really resonated and you need to send it to somebody, feel free. That means you care. And get your questions in. And I just so appreciate the support and listening to the podcast. Have a great week. I'll see you next time on Waking Up to Narcissism.